Disability Services, Department of Disability Services Community Forum. My name is Winslow Woodland. I am the Developmental Disabilities Administration Deputy Director, and I will be sitting in today for Director Andrew Reese, who could not be available today. I'd like to start off welcoming you and presenting our data that we have on our COVID-19 cases for the most recent COVID-19 case data, which should be appearing on your screen shortly.
I'm sorry, Winslow, give me one moment.
Yes, could you please share the presentation? All right, what you have on the screen is a table showing people diagnosed with COVID-19 by month, starting with March of 2020. And as you can see, it's a very graphic representation of the peaks and the valleys of the diagnosis. Next slide, please. Okay. And so here you have a breakout of the diagnosis by placement type and percentages of overall diagnosis. As you can see, the larger numbers of diagnoses have been within our supportive living setting, followed by our natural homes and our intermediate care facilities. Next. And in terms of people who require hospitalizations, overall, there have been a total of 144, and this is a representation. As you can see, we have not had many people within the last quarter who've been needing to be hospitalized, which we're very pleased about. And we're still encouraging people to get vaccinated, because what we're finding is with the positive cases that are coming in, those who've been vaccinated have not required hospitalization. And we have, here we have the number of people who have I'm having a little trouble seeing this screen, but this is the number of deaths that have been confirmed as COVID-19 deaths. And as you can see, we're very pleased to report that this number has been remaining steady. We have 38 total confirmed COVID-19 deaths of our reported number of 75. And so what that means is 37 people have died that we don't have. We either know that they haven't died of COVID, or we have pending cases. And right now, I believe the number of pending cases, the rest at 11, that we don't have definitive cause of death, or whether the death was related to COVID. Next slide, please. As of the 23rd of June, our overall number of people supported by DDA who had vaccination is 87%. Our host home numbers are 99%. Our ICF numbers are 99%. Natural homes, we have 77%. Rest habs, we have 100%. Supported living, 93%. And overall, the vaccination rates to include boosters overall is 77% as of the 23rd. Of provider staff, we have an overall percentage of 95 have been vaccinated as of the 16th of June. And provider staff eligible for boosters and having received the boosters is 68%. And of DDS staff, we have a 98% vaccination rate. And in terms of those who have received the booster, that number is, sorry, I have one question coming in, 93%. Next slide. So we have a packed agenda for you today. I'm going to introduce Donald Clark. Many of you may have met Donald. Donald is working with our State Office of Policy, Planning, and Innovation. And Donald's going to talk to you about some efforts regarding technology. And
thank you, Winslow. Appreciate it. Can you see my screen?
it's very colorful, I might add.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As Winslow stated, I'm Donald Clark, Program Development Specialist with DDS, leading Tech First efforts for the agency. And I'm excited to announce today two events. One being our Tech Fest that's going to be on August 16th at MLK Library. Some of you may be asking, what is Tech Fest? This is our first time hosting this kind of tech summit where we're hoping to be able to expose our stakeholders to all the great tech solutions and how they are enabling more opportunities to achieve independence. So it's an opportunity for people to hear some of the best practices, as well as learning how tech is being implemented for people to achieve greater independence, as well as we're also going to have actual makers of these tech solutions exhibiting them, and an opportunity for people to touch, feel, and play with them and ask questions for great tech solutions. We are also offering this not only in person, but virtually. I would have to say that, you know, the virtual experience will be the main agenda of the show. And you really will only be able to take advantage of the exhibits in person. But that is another way for you to attend and learn about the Tech Fest event and all these great tech solutions. This is something that we're really hoping that is a mainstay in the district, and we continue to lead this and create this opportunity on an annual basis moving forward. Really understanding just, you know, the advancements in technology and affordability of technology and how it's really people with disabilities are using tech as tools to achieve greater independence. So you will be able to find this registration link on DDS's webpage under upcoming events. I'll also drop the link under the chat. I also wanted to share another thing that Tech First and DDS is rolling out, and is part two, because in fact, with our partners at Tech Together through Octo, we previously hosted Tech Tutor Labs. This was a small, intimate group. We made sure of that, so attendees had the opportunities to really, you know, get the hands-on attention from the facilitator on tech basics. So we're back at it again, and we're doing the series this time to ensure that learners and people who do register for these Tech Tutor Lab sessions, people with disabilities, have the opportunity to build on the skills from the last session to the next. Again, with our partners at DC Tech Together. This will run from July 7th through the 27th at DDS. And, you know, we hope to also keep this as a mainstay in the district and really, you know, build on this. As we all know, one key to people being more comfortable with tech is just being comfortable with the basics first and foremost, and being open. That creates the gateway to being open to other tech solutions. So this will also be on our webpage under upcoming events. And we're excited to keep this going. And I think it's a capacity of 15 people again, to ensure, the facilitator can really be hands-on. So we look forward to seeing you and our advocates to come to attend this and get more comfortable with tech. Thank you.
Thank you so, oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. Sounds very exciting. And I want to give a special shout out to our IT department because they highlighted my technology deficits today by supporting me through what I thought was going to be an easy kind of venture switching to this new platform. Thank you, Donald, for that. Hopefully everyone can take advantage of those opportunities. Today, we're also joined by Sandy Bernstein from Disability Rights DC at University Legal Services. And Sandy's going to talk to you today regarding the law surrounding the Developmental Disabilities Expansion Reform. Sandy, you're going to get those acronyms right?
I am, but first I'm going to try to make sure I can get my PowerPoint up. So hold on one second. All right, hold on. It's not popping up. Hold on one second. It did when we tried it out. But hold on.
Hey, Sandy.
Wait, hold on. Sorry, I'm not sure why it's not popping up. It's on my screen. So hold on.
Sandy, were you able to hit the share button at the bottom?
There we go. Is it up there now?
Yeah, you may want to hit up at the top where you're showing just your one slide.
So you're going to click on slideshow, Sandy.
Sorry, I'm having problems on my screen. Hold on. Did that work? Slideshow. How's that?
Perfect.
Excellent.
All right, so you can see I need the technology first lessons that we just heard about. Thank you, everybody. Sorry for the technology difficulties. I'm very excited to talk to you today about the Developmental Disability Eligibility Reform Amendment Act of 2021. It's an upcoming law. It's going to take effect very soon. It just was passed by City Council a few months ago and went through a passive review by Congress. And so this is upcoming, very, very current news and very exciting. Why was this law needed? As many of you probably know, the Developmental Disability Administration, DDA in DC, only provides services to people with intellectual disabilities who have a certain IQ score. So for DC DDA services, you need to qualify for services. You have to have an IQ of 69 or below with consideration of the standard error of measurement, which basically means you need to have an IQ score between 64 and 74. You also have to have adaptive functioning deficits to be able to qualify for services and get community-based long-term supports from DDA. DC is currently one of only a few, there's only 4 other places in the United States who limit services to their DD services to people with intellectual disabilities, who require an IQ score to get their DD services. And soon those 4 states will be alone and we will not be one of them. Because currently people with developmental disabilities in DC who don't have the IQ score for an intellectual disability are unable to access community-based services that they need once they become adults. And so, for example, if you are someone who is autistic and maybe you got a lot of services while you were in special education, you were in school, maybe you received a full-time aid, maybe you were even placed in a non-public segregated school, maybe you were in a residential placement, you got lots of services, but you had an IQ score, just say of 80 or of 100. But you had a lot of needs. Currently, when you leave school, there are no community-based long-term supports for you unless you need supports for activities of daily living. So if you're someone with a disability who needs help using the bathroom or eating or transferring, those services have been available. But if you need other supports and other long-term supports, that has not been available to a person who fits that example because they don't have the IQ required to have an intellectual disability. So for many years, obviously, people with disabilities, family members, advocates, the community has been very upset about this and the inequity of not allowing people with developmental disability who don't have the IQ to be able to get the services that they need, right? I mean, everyone has, there's been so much put into teaching individuals with developmental disabilities skills and teaching them to be more independent while they're in school. And it doesn't really make any sense. And it's not, certainly is not fair that when they leave school that these services just disappear and they just fall off a cliff in terms of not getting services. And that obviously can lead to harm. It can lead to losing skills. It can lead to people being institutionalized or even worse, being incarcerated because they're not getting the services that they need to live their best life. And for example, they may be able to get some services from RSA, some short-term employment supports, but they can't get long-term support. So they may have a job and then they may get services from RSA, but that's only short-term. And if they need long-term supports, it puts them in jeopardy of losing their employment and becoming more dependent on the system rather than not living independent lives. And fortunately, City Council heard the cry of the community. It was Councilmember Nadeau, so thank her if you see her. She actually spearheaded the legislation and other council members signed on and took action to pass this law just a few short months ago. And so what does this law do? It takes effect as of October 1st, 2022. And fortunately, it's been also included in that fiscal year's budget from the mayor. So it is a funded change in law. And what it says is that adults with developmental disabilities will now be eligible for services from DC DDA. And so, of course, you're all wondering, well, what does that mean? What is a developmental disability? And of course, it is defined in the law. There are other definitions of developmental disability that you may be aware of. There's something in the Federal Developmental Disabilities Act. People refer to that as the DD Act. This definition is similar, but not exactly the same. Other states also have definitions of developmental disabilities. This shares a lot of characteristics with some states, but not the same as others. But this is the one that will determine if someone gets services and has a developmental disabilities for purposes of DDA starting on October 1st. So very, very short time away. And what it is I'm going to break it down. So first it says a severe and chronic disability. So this is a significant disability. This isn't a minor disability. This is a very significant disability that is attributable to a mental or physical impairment. So it has to be related to one of those, other than the sole diagnosis of mental illness. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit, explaining what that means, or a combination of mental or physical impairments. You can have both. That is manifested before the person turns age 22. So it has to happen before the person's 22nd birthday. So it could happen, they could be born with it. It could happen when they're 3 years old, or it can happen when they're 21 years old. Is likely to continue indefinitely. So this isn't something that, you have a really significant, leg issue, you're having real problems, but, in a few months, you're going to be better. Even if that happened before you were age 22, that is not going to be considered a developmental disability because it's not likely to continue indefinitely. And this is where the real meat of the definition comes in. In addition to all of that, your disability must result in a substantial limitation in 3 or more of these 8 major life activities. I'm going to go through them. So the first one is self-care. So your ability to take care of, for example, your hygiene needs. Understanding and use of language. Are you able to understand? Are you able to be understood? How do you receive information? How do you express information? Your functional academics. How did you do in school? How do you do in reading and math skills? Your social skills, your ability to interact appropriately with others in your world. Mobility, your ability to be mobile and get around. Self-direction, your ability to direct your own life, to be able to direct your own services and to make your own decisions. Your capacity for independent living, are you able to live out there in the community on your own? Are you able to make the decisions we all make for those of us who live independently? Are you able to do that on your own without support? And health and safety. So, for example, are you able to, do you know what to do if you smell smoke? Do you know how to call 911? Do you know how to take precautions in your home not to cause any damage to yourself? Do you know when to call the doctor when you're not feeling well, or when to reach out for emergency medical assistance if your health is not doing well? Now, a lot of people say, well, if I have this, am I covered? If I have this disability, the law very specifically does not list specific diagnoses or medical conditions that are covered. So it doesn't say if you have this, you're eligible for DDA services, but if you have this, this one, you're not. And so there's also no list that says if you have this, you're excluded. So there's nothing that says if you have a specific learning disability, no, you don't get services. There's nothing saying you do. Same thing with autism. It really depends on whether or not it meets the definition. So the definition I just went through primarily focused on, do you meet 3 of those 8 substantial major life activity deficits? Now, there is an exception when I say that there isn't, there's no one excluded. There is one group excluded, and that is people who solely have a diagnosed psychiatric condition, disability, or mental illness are not eligible for DDA. So what does that mean? That means, for example, just say I am a person who is 16 years old, or when I was 16 years old, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. That's the only disability that I have. I only have schizophrenia. It is a significant mental impairment. I acquired it before age 22. I actually probably can check 3 of the 8 substantial functional limitations. So I would meet developmental disability, possibly defined in other places. But for DDA purposes, you are not eligible. I would not be eligible for services from DDA because my only developmental disability, or the only disability that I had that developed before age 22 is a mental illness. But for example, I would be able to get services very likely from the Department of Behavioral Health in DC, just not from DDA. Now, just say, here I am again, I'm diagnosed at 16 with schizophrenia, but I also am autistic, or I also have another a developmental disability that falls under the definition, then I would be eligible for services. So someone can have a mental illness and they can have an intellectual disability and they can have another developmental disability. They can still be eligible, but they can't only have a mental illness to get services from DDA. And the district's reasoning for that is because those individuals can qualify for services from the Department of Behavioral Health. Some other changes, in addition to revising eligibility to include people with developmental disabilities, there are some other changes in the law that I want to make you aware of. Number 1, it changes the definition of what an intellectual disability, what it is. Currently, you may be aware that an intellectual disability for DDA purposes is you must have an intellectual disability or have the IQ, the low IQ I mentioned before, and adaptive functioning deficits. It must have developed before age 18. That is now changing, and it will be now prior to age 22. So it will actually match the same definition in the eligibility criteria for developmental disability. It also, the law says that it will track the definition of intellectual disability, whatever the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. That's a very well-regarded and well-recognized, basically, gathering of mental disorders. So whatever that book says, whatever that listing says, it defines intellectual disability, is how the DC DDA will define intellectual disability. So currently, it looks to, it does have an IQ requirement, very similar to the one that exists now. And it says that the person must have an adaptive functioning deficit across one domain. And if that were to change with a different version of the DSM, then the definition for DDA services would also change. So what types of services are available? Fortunately, this law actually requires the district to seek amendments to their waivers to include people with developmental disabilities. So this means that all of currently the waiver services that are in either the individuals with developmental disabilities waiver and the individual and family support waiver, so both waivers that DDA manages, the district is putting in a request to amend those waivers to include all of those services for people with developmental disabilities in addition to people with intellectual disabilities. So assuming that CMS approves the amendment, and we have no reason to believe that they wouldn't, those services would all be available to people with developmental disabilities. What the law does not require, though, is the district to increase the number of waiver slots available in either of those waivers. You may be aware that it is not an unlimited number of slots that are currently in the IDD and the IFS waiver. There are a good number of slots available, which is very fortunate. Many states, you may be aware, have very long waiting lists. DC does not currently have a waiting list because there are slots available, but it is possible that there will be a waiting list because there will be an additional population of individuals that are now eligible for services. And there is no requirement in this law that the district has to seek an increase in the number of slots to address that. It's not letting me go forward to the next slide. Oh, there we go. And so, and just one last thing is I just wanted to make people aware, because I hear this from other people is, oh no, is this going to affect my services? I am someone with an intellectual disability, or my family member is, and they get services, or they're coming, they're going to be eligible for services. And the law is very clear. There's something called the grandfather clause. That's what it's called in the law, that states that people who are already found eligible for DDA services will not have their services altered or changed in any way. So this is actually providing services to a group of population, a population of individuals who really have been denied services for many, many years, actually, but it will not impact or hurt the people that are currently getting services. It just makes these services available to more people in need, as we should, as does almost every state in this country. So I'm going to now turn it over to Dr. Van Horn, who's going to, I believe, talk a little bit about how the agency will put into practice how to determine if someone has a developmental disability.
Thank you, Sandy. That was a great segue. Let me get set up here. And okay, can everybody see my slides there and the notes pages? I don't necessarily want to advance this. Charlize, do you know how to show one slide at a time?
Right now, we're not able to see your screen as of yet, Dr. Van.
Okay. Sandy, I think we're both going to be in that class on the technology.
See you there.
All right.
Go to your left and click from the beginning. Oh, you Dr. Van Horn, your slides were on the screen a second
I could
ago.
see them, but apparently you could not. So
We did see them, now we don't.
how about that?
Yeah, now, if you want to click slideshow, yes, there we go. From the beginning.
Dr. Van Horn, I'm sharing your slides.
There it is.
You could just let me know when you want me to go to the next slide.
Fantastic, thank you. So Sandy did a great introduction to this new era in DDA services, and I'm very excited to now talk about how DDA will be revising its eligibility determination process to match the new legislation. Can everybody hear me okay, or am I muffled? Good. Okay, so next slide, please. the new statute does several things. First of all, it presents a new definition of intellectual disability, which I'll talk about. It defines developmental disability, as Sandy just described, and it introduces these new criteria called substantial functional limitations. And I'll talk about how DDA will be measuring that during the intake process. The statute expands services to people with all developmental disabilities. Developmental disabilities are conditions that first appear in childhood and adolescence. So we don't see these conditions appearing for the first time in adulthood, like dementia, for example. And they tend to be lifelong conditions that may lead to impairment in social functioning, brain functioning, language, mobility, physical challenges, and medical conditions. Some examples of developmental disabilities are ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, Fragile X syndrome is an example. Intellectual disability is a developmental disability, as are muscular dystrophy and Tourette's syndrome. But as Sandy said, you don't have to have a specific diagnosis, and no specific diagnoses are excluded. These are just some names that you may be familiar with, and I wanted to mention those. The challenges with each of these conditions can range from being very mild to being very severe. Some people with these conditions need no assistance or support at all, and others need total care. So they range along a continuum. Next slide, please. So what's new? There's a new definition of intellectual disability that aligns with the DSM, as Sandy said. It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. We're now in the 5th edition, which turned into the revised 5th edition on March 18th. So we are operating using the DSM-5-TR for text revision. So if we're going to use the DSM, we have to know what it says. So I'll talk about that in a minute. And I'll also talk about how DDS proposes to measure those 3 out of 8 areas of functional limitations, substantial functional limitations. Our process will involve looking at multiple sources of information, including the person's supporting documentation and records. We will be using the DDS Level of Need Assessment Tool, or the LON. And lastly, we will be interviewing the person, if possible, and those people who know the person well and can explain what their functional capabilities are and what supports they will need. So it's a comprehensive process. Next slide. So let's look at the definition of intellectual disability according to the DSM-5-TR. The first criteria requires deficits in intellectual functioning. The second criteria requires the person to also have deficits in adaptive functioning. And lastly, the deficits have to be evident sometime during childhood and adolescence, which we call the developmental period. These 3 prongs of the definition of intellectual disability haven't changed in 50 years. So this is not new. Next slide, please. So criterion A, deficits in intellectual functioning, is met when the person has a full-scale IQ score in the range of 65 to 75. So people with intellectual disability have IQ scores around 70, including a margin for measurement error, which is generally plus or minus 5 points. So this is the range of 65 to 75 that I just mentioned. But a score is not necessarily a score. So clinical training and judgment are required from a psychologist to help us understand what those test scores really mean. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to come back to criterion B, but criterion C says that the onset of the intellectual and adaptive deficits in an intellectual disability occur during the developmental period. That means that they're present during childhood and adolescence. You don't generally see intellectual disability being observed or noticed for the first time as an adult, but somebody may not actually get diagnosed until they are an adult. Next slide. So criterion B says that the person has to have deficits in adaptive functioning. And what that means is that criterion B is met when at least one domain of adaptive functioning is sufficiently impaired that the person needs ongoing support across multiple environments, like the home, like school, work, and in the community. So adaptive deficits are measured using both clinical evaluation from people who are qualified to interpret rating scales that measure adaptive functioning, and it's assessed using culturally appropriate, psychometrically sound rating scales like the Vineland or the Adaptive Behavior Assessment System are some common names. Conceptual adaptive skills have to do with learning. They have to do with abstract thinking and problem solving. This also captures memory, language, and learning in school. The social domain has to do with the skills we use for making friends, keeping friends, communicating with people, managing our relationships, and basically getting along with other folks. And then lastly, the practical domain has to do with the skills for personal care, household care, safety, using the community, and work. Okay, so we have 3 domains, and the person is required to have impairments in at least one of those that's sufficient to require ongoing support. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go over this definition. I think Sandy did a great job of outlining what the statute says. I do want to add a little bit of additional detail to what functional limitations in major life activities we're talking about. So self-care has to do with those personal care activities that we do for our daily comfort: hygiene, grooming, bathing, toileting, eating, that sort of thing. Understanding and use of language has to do with, as Sandy said, are you able to understand what people are saying to you? And are you able to communicate either verbally or non-verbally so that other people can understand what you're trying to say or convey? Broadly interpreted, though, understanding and use of language has to do with social language. And these are the rules of conversation that we follow when we're talking to other people. Do we alter our tone of voice? Do we take turns in a conversation?
Is a personal phone or Johns Hopkins phone?
Yes. Do we understand humor? If somebody gets a joke, do you get the joke? Do you know
Is it Johns
that?
Hopkins?
Can you mute yourself, please?
So understanding and use of language is expressive skills, receptive skills, and also social language and using the appropriate rules of conversation. Some people, don't communicate at all and would have a functional limitation, obviously, in that circumstance. Functional academics is not grades. This is not your algebra grade or your trigonometry grade, but these are the aspects of academics that you need for independence in your day-to-day life, like being able to read a bus schedule, understanding how to budget and not overdraw your bank account, understanding how to read the signs so that you don't accidentally go into the men's bathroom when you intended to go into the women's bathroom because you didn't understand the sign. So people who have functional limitations in functional academics have limitations in the academics that are needed for independence in your real world situations. Social skills, again, are skills for making friends, keeping friends, managing interactions with people at home, at work, in the community. And it also includes leisure and recreation activities. It's broadly defined. Mobility, of course, is being able to sit, stand, and move from one place to another. Self-direction has to do with, can you make choices? Can you start an activity? Can you take the steps needed to complete that activity and follow directions? And self-direction doesn't occur in a vacuum. Self-direction for what? It could be self-direction for work. It could be self-direction for getting your household chores done. So in my perspective and in DDA's perspective, that's broadly defined. The capacity for independent living has to do with, can you provide for your food? Can you provide for your housing and maintain a household? Can you get the clothing and healthcare resources that you need without someone having to help you with that? And then lastly, health and safety has to do with managing your health, preventing illness, and protecting yourself from injury, life-threatening injuries or anything that could result in a medical problem. It could be as specific as avoiding a body of water if you can't swim, to making sure you don't drink the wrong liquid, thinking that cleaner was orange juice, something like that. And the critical piece of the definition for DDS will be that the condition requires lifelong or extended supports, ongoing supports. So as Sandy said, if you just have a temporary leg injury, that would not be a condition that requires ongoing, lifelong, or extended supports. The law says that the disability reflects the person's need for a combination of and sequence of special, interdisciplinary, or generic services, individualized supports, or other forms of assistance that are lifelong, person-centered, planned, and coordinated. So this is much more than just needing reminders. These are specialized, ongoing supports. So we've got a lot that we need to consider under this new law. Next slide, please. So how are we going to look at or assess substantial functional limitations? The tool that we're going to use is a tool that DDS has been using for many, many years, ever since Laura Nuss was the director of the agency, and we know how long ago that was. The level of need, or the LON, assesses, for the purpose of intake and eligibility, will assess 8 major life activities: the self-care, understanding and use of language, social skills, functional academics, mobility, capacity for independent living, health and safety, and self-direction. And I just explained how we're defining those. The items on the LON describe the level of support that the person needs to maintain their health and safety or to achieve their personal goals. It's not a diagnostic tool. It's not going to tell us whether the person has autism or has ADHD. It's going to tell us that given that condition, what support does that person need to maintain health and safety or to meet their goals? Some people can do tasks independently. Some people need support. Some people need substantial support. And some people will not be able to do the activity at all. So those are the kinds of criteria we're going to be assessing using the LON. the nice thing about the lawn is that it allows us to assess people's needs in an equitable and consistent manner based on interviews, observations, and records. If we just had a checklist or a rating scale, people would not be able to explain their unique functional capabilities. For example, a rating scale might ask you, how often do you use a telephone? Well, the person sometimes, usually, never uses a telephone, but it doesn't allow you to explain that in order to use the telephone, somebody has to program the numbers into the phone, and then the person can only use the phone by asking Siri to call mom. Okay, so the LAN process allows the person to talk about their unique functional capabilities and the support they need. It's much more person-centered. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how does this LAN work? Many of you have probably heard of this in the context of ISP meetings, but it identifies the major life activities where the person needs support in accordance with the new law. It measures support based on that individual's specific challenges and limitations. You're not being compared to a normative group of people who do not have disabilities. This is looking at the supports this particular person needs for them to maintain safety, maintain health, and achieve their personal goals. The way the LAN is completed is that the eligibility determination unit team completes the LAN during the case review process. So the psychologist and the service coordinator and the other team members review all of the documentation submitted with the application. And then the interview that was done with the person and people who know the person well. And then they complete the questions on the LAN based on the interviews, their direct observations, and the supporting documentation. So what kind of documentation? We're talking about school records, prior vocational assessments. Someone might have occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech evaluations, psychological evaluations, psychiatric records are helpful, and medical records. And we'll take anything that describes, your challenges, your limitations, and the kind of support that you need. So if your documentation is not on this list, that doesn't mean it can't be considered. And as I said earlier, the team will also interview the person, if possible, and the person's supporters to get additional information. Next slide, please. So how will we interview the person and their supporters? DDS has developed a functional skills interview in collaboration with the VCU Center for Autism Excellence. The interview originally was developed through a grant with Autism Speaks, and the VCU Center for Autism Excellence constructed the interview with the help of folks from Autism Speaks and adapted it for our use here in the district. And the interview asks open-ended questions about the functional capabilities and the support needs of people with disabilities ranging from 12 to adult. Presumably, until you're age 12, your parents and other caregivers are helping you with a lot of these functions. So that the questions really target those skills for people 12 and up. It assesses the person's needs across multiple settings. So we're looking at the home, we're looking at the day setting. For those people who are working, we're looking at the supports they need in the work setting and in the community for leisure and recreation, going to the bank, that sort of thing. And the interview assesses skills and supports in 9 areas: leisure and recreation, work, self-determination and advocacy. These are choices. Are you able to make choices and provide for your needs? Health and safety, peer relationships, and this is broadly defined. This is how you get along with people at work, how you get along with people in the community, socialization, social communication. Do you understand how to keep a conversation going? Do you understand humor? Do you change your tone of voice appropriately? Social communication also refers to changing your language depending on the situation you're in. You know, are you able to modify your language when you're talking to your friends compared to when you're talking to your boss? It looks at community participation, mobility, home living, and transportation. The answers are then corroborated with the supporting documentation, with the direct observations, and with what other informants report about the person's capabilities. Most states, when they look at your functional skills, just have you complete a rating scale or a checklist, and the number determines, you know, whether you get services or not. But this approach is much more person-centered, and it allows for the individual to highlight, you know, their unique needs. So we're very excited about adding this to our intake process. Next slide, please. Next slide. So we're going to interview, you know, the person and other informants who might be interviewed. We might speak with a person's parent, anybody who knows the applicant well, the partner, the spouse, the roommate. It could be a job coach, somebody who's worked, you know, as a supervisor or as a coworker with the person. Some folks will come to us with case managers, like people who are already linked with health services for children with special needs. And case managers are often a wealth of information about the supports someone might need to be fully integrated into the community. Employers and school staff are also people who could be interviewed as part of the eligibility process. Next slide. So this is my last slide, and I think it captures the process that we will be using. The functional skills interview will give us a lot of rich, detailed information about the person's needs in many areas. And then that information will be combined with the supporting documentation that the person submits during the intake process and direct observations. And it will all be reviewed together by the eligibility and determination team to complete the level of need screening tool. Is there one more slide, Charlie? Okay, that was the last slide. Can we go back, if you don't mind, to around slide number 6? No, it's not 6. Keep going down. I want to show the criteria for the lawn that the person must meet to be considered having a substantial functional limitation. I forgot to mention that one. Okay, so on the lawn, these are the current scores the person has to get on the lawn to be eligible for waiver services, and they're appropriate for this part of the eligibility process as well. The self-care criteria for having a substantial functional limitation is that you have to have a score of 3 or greater in personal care on the lawn. For understanding and use of language and impairments with social communication, you have to have a 1 or greater in the items that measure communication on the lawn. And this is how it goes. The social skills requires a 3 or greater in social life. Functional academics we'll get from the psychological evaluations. Mobility requires you to have a 1 on the items that assess mobility. capacity for independent living requires a 2. The scores on the lawn range from 0 to 8. So you can see we have a very low bar here. If you get a 1, that means that your impairment doesn't have to be so profound that you're total care. A 1 out of 8 is a very low score. Low scores mean that you need less support. High scores, 7 and 8, mean that you need substantial amounts of support. So we're not requiring people to have profound levels of impairment in order to be deemed eligible for our services, because we know that there are people who need support whose impairments may not be profound. And the 3 or more major life activities is going to be measured by the lawn. For folks with autism, that situation is kind of unique because the challenges in one area tend to show up in other areas. So if you have challenges with social skills, it's going to affect your ability to work, which is under capacity for independent living. It's also going to affect your self-direction, being able to make choices and understand how to initiate a task, follow through with a task, explain, your reasoning and processing when that's necessary. So it's not hard to have 3 or more areas of challenge on the lawn. So I'm excited about capturing the people that were legally mandated to serve under the new statute without leaving people out. And that's really what we want to do. So at this point, I will turn it over.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Van Horn. As well as thank you, Sandy and Donald, for those very informative presentations. If there are questions, I do see that we have several comments, one of which is, can you please give us a link to the place you put these documents on the DDS website, since it's difficult to find them? And I am assuming that you mean the presentations from today. Ms. Payne will be placing those on our website within the coming days. I would say that in terms of a link, I don't know, Charlie said, if there's a specific link that you can provide prior to uploading the document. So I'll leave that. Okay. Charissa has placed the link into the chat. So thank you very much, Charissa. And then we have another comment that says that the explanation of the lawn is very helpful. Thank you. And then there's one that says that I can barely hear you. Are people having trouble hearing me? Or is this an individual case? Okay, so I'm getting, I can hear you. Also, we have a link in the chat that Health and Joy is inviting you to a scheduled Zoom meeting. The topic is Health and Joy virtual monthly party with a live DJ today from 6 to 9. And there is a link in the chat. I don't know how we can share that for those who may be on the phone, because it's a pretty lengthy Zoom meeting link. I suspect that Health and Joy likely has a website that you probably could go to and find it. Let's see what else. And then we have determining what substantial need and what isn't can be very subjective. How do DDS staff make the determination? And are there quality checks for that? For example, if one person disagrees with another person's determination that a substantial need exists, what happens? And when you say another person, I'm not exactly clear when we talk about the review of this documentation. We're talking about the initial eligibility determinations being made by a team that is made up of psychologists and staff who are specifically trained in eligibility and have been making eligibility determinations for some time. I do recognize that if a person, and I've said this before, if someone doesn't agree with an eligibility determination, there's not a lot that anyone can say to that person that's going to convince them if they really believe that they're eligible. But our criteria are pretty specific, and I'm not really clear on the sort of statement of subjectivity. So if we could kind of, if I could get a better understanding of the term subjectivity with regard to eligibility determinations, I don't believe that they're subjective. I think that professionals use tried and true methods as well as tools that determine eligibility. So limiting what is in the question described as subjectivity, I'd like probably to elaborate a little more. And Carl, again, is saying my voice is going in and out, but earlier when it was going in and out, others were saying that it wasn't going in and out on their side. So I'm not really clear as whether these are individual technology problems. So I apologize for any tech challenges that we're having. I'm not moving and I'm not changing, and the equipment that I'm using is pretty consistent. I haven't moved. We do have the owls in place. They usually pick you up when you're moving, but I'm sitting pretty, straight. Okay. Let's see, we got some more messages here. Hold on. And Jocelyn is saying it's hard to hear you. Yes, it is going in and out. So I can hear you, but you are softer than the other speakers. All right, I'll try to raise my voice a bit. Health and Joy has posted their website, and it is healthandjoyservices.com. Health and Joy Services is one word.com. And then I'm getting you sound physically distant from the mic. So I'm going to raise my voice a little. And then I'm getting I sound fine. So I guess if I'll just keep being a little loud. I'm not yelling at you guys. I just want to make sure those who can't hear me can hear me. I've never really been called loud.
Winslow, you may have muted yourself. Your sound went away.
See, our interpreter is stuck with a smile that is glaring, but okay, we're back. Our interpreter's back. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make people laugh, but it is one of the things that makes me happy to do. So, again, I'll just repeat, the presentations will be uploaded today. I do believe we'll have other opportunities in the future to provide offerings. I would love for anyone who has concerns about the eligibility process that we will be using to submit those to us, and by us, I mean DDA, winslow.woodland@dc.gov. And what we'll do is, we'll try to get to the meat of the concern. And again, with my experience, for those who don't know, I've been the first line of review, the second line of review when there is a question of eligibility. A person can contest that decision previously at a level 1 review. And then if they disagree with that decision, it would come to me, and then I would conduct a review. And if that decision if a person continues to remain, concerned about that outcome, there's the ability to take it into a next level of review. I can honestly say in my experience in years as deputy, I probably have only had 5 or 6 that have reached my desk in terms of review. And we conduct many determinations over the year. I think we average just under 80 determinations a year. So yeah, I definitely don't want anyone within our stakeholder community, within the public, to have concerns about our process to where there are maybe concerns that it's not fair and equitable and considers all factors relevant to a person. And I am aware of what I would consider to be a sort of a flattering compliment that's been leveled directly and indirectly at our agency. I believe that over the years, we have built a strong, solid system that provides a wealth of services that are high quality and comparable to any state within the nation. And as a result, people want those services, and in some cases, they may not actually be eligible for them, but we do offer a robust group of services. And it is frustrating when someone's needs are not being met, but yet they don't fall within our eligibility standard and or criteria. And in those cases, what we attempt to do is to forward those people to the appropriate social service programs and nonprofit community-based programs within the city so that their needs actually can be met. Well, right now we're just about at 1:19 p.m. And it's my understanding that we have a wonderful presentation that will be shared with you. And I believe that is coming from Allison. Allison White has a offering that was presented previously, but it's a very informative and enlightening and uplifting presentation. And Charlize, I don't know whether we have that available or whether we have to have Allison share that with us.
Yes, I will share the video. The video is captioned. It will go past our 1:30 timeline, but I will let the first 10 minutes.
All right, well, again, folks, please stay safe. Enjoy what I'm told is going to be a hot weekend, and we will see you in a couple of weeks, and enjoy the video. I don't hear anything.
Become these data-rich smart devices that assist the everyday person with daily living tasks. And with those items, they change at the speed of light. They're always changing and evolving and becoming even smarter every day. The problem is that people with disabilities are often left on the sidelines when it comes to accessing this tech. So we have an opportunity here in the district to bridge that gap. And we really have the chance to enhance people's lives for them to act and promote their self-determination and be equal participants in today's society by using these tech solutions. So insert tech first and what that really means to the Department of Disability Services. And we're hoping to grow this to mean something to district partners throughout the district. And what technology first is really a commitment, not only to expanding, but also diversifying the use of tech as tools by people with disabilities. Always with the goal in mind to either promote living independently, whether in the community, home, or the workplace. So in our culture, as far as support planning in DC DDS, we really want to grow to always refer to technology as the first option when we talk about support planning and achieving outcomes for people with disabilities. And some things we've done this year really to push this forward is, number one, invest in our service providers to understand the best practices when it comes to person-centered planning around tech solutions, and really be those strong support brokers when it comes to tech discovery, matching, and implementation when working with people with disabilities to identify what their desired outcomes are. Another thing we really aim to do is roll out a Tech First web series, and we hope to do many more in the future that really showcase some of the tech solutions that are available to people with disabilities. And not only people with disabilities, but these tech solutions are solutions that anyone can use to assist them in daily life living. They've proven to be impactful. And we rolled out the series each month focusing on a life domain from the life course, charting the life course framework, where we highlighted 2 to 3 tech solutions, whether it's focusing on safety and security, or healthy living, or community living, and so on and so on. The link is provided below. I'll send this out to attendees where they can access and watch these hour showcases of these phenomenal tech solutions. Another thing DC DDS has really been focused on is how can we leverage the American Rescue Plan Act, to leverage opportunities for to launch tech first projects. We just kicked off our telehealth service, which was really to address the health disparities people all with disabilities always experience, but was only heightened after COVID. And really with the focus of mitigating unnecessary ER visits and hospitalizations. We were able to disseminate tech to people with disabilities to access the service, launch a training, and we hope to really pursue this to be a long-term option for the people we support. We also really focus on how we can improve our process for tech acquisition. How can we improve how we get tech in the hands of people with disabilities to use as tools? And we're looking forward to piloting an online platform that uses artificial intelligence to automate the matching process based on people's needs, capabilities, and preferences. Also, we really are focusing on another project where we're looking at remote supports and matching people to tech and seeing how we can move forward with actually getting the tech to them, training them in their circle of support around those tech solutions to utilize remote supports. Last but not least, and most importantly, out of all we're doing with Tech First and some of the things we have done, one critical thing is that we need to always focus on community partnership to advance our efforts. Really looking district-wide of Tech First becoming, initiative that everyone embraces, and community really getting behind it. And this is just a statement saying, by embracing our individual differences, the community receives greater benefits.
Looks like we're having some technical difficulty, folks.
Using each other's resources for the greater good to achieve check first. Here are some highlighted partners: DC Assistive Technology Center, which is almost like in the district can be a spot where people can go to make informed decisions about tech. Touch, feel, and play with it before they acquire it to see what they're comfortable with and what they want to pursue. DC Center for Accessibility is another great partner who offers resources such as workshops and trainings around tech basics. And we're hoping to grow that partnership as well in the future. And last but not least, who's here with us today is Tech Together DC. We have a lot of overlapping focus areas that we're hoping that we can build a partnership and advance efforts. And below is just some of those we hope to build, creating opportunities for discovery and learning. How can we improve access to tech for people to acquire tech, affordable tech, and also receive the wraparound supports they may need to effectively utilize it? How can we bridge the gap as far as digital literacy and give people the fundamentals they need to even acquire tech? One thing is that we have to address the comfort level of not only people with disabilities, but their circle of support, caregivers or service providers as well, because they are a vital piece to making sure that people utilize tech as a tool. And without all this, we need to address internet access, affordable internet for people with disabilities, so we can close the digital divide and they can use their tech solutions. So with that being said, we have a partner here today, as I previously stated, from Tech Together. Mr. Adrian Sutton, previously he did some workshops here at DDS as a test run for us, and we're hoping to grow this opportunity throughout the district for people with disabilities. So Adrian, say hello to the people and thank you for joining us.
Hello, kings and queens. Donald, thank you for that grand introduction. My name is Adrian Sutton, and I work for Octo, the techie part of DC government. If you was a DC government employee and you got like an email or your phone, then my agency would be the agency that will help you out. Mayor Bowser, our mayor, has tagged me with connecting communities with technology and putting technologies into communities. And some of the ways I do this is by teaching senior citizens how to become millennials with their smart devices. Since the pandemic, we've learned that it's been more than just senior residents that need tech support. So that's why I'm here today. I'm here to inform any and everybody about tech support. And right now, we're going to go over a very basic smartphone 101 course. It says smartphone 101, but you can also use these same tips and tricks for your tablet as well. So I'm going to share my screen, and that's always a scary thing because you never know what may show. All right, so a smartphone. What is a smartphone? Well, a smartphone is basically a mini computer. All right, think about your laptop, think about your desktop, and think about the functions that you could do on those laptops and that desktop. For the most part, you could do all those things on your smartphone or your tablet. Some things are a little bit easier to do. Some things are a little bit more recommended to do on your laptop compared to your phone. What are you talking about? I'm talking about like filling out a job application. Filling out a job application, I would recommend doing that on a laptop or a desktop. It's just easier to type. Maybe you are applying or recertifying for like your Medicaid benefits, or maybe you're in school, you need to type up a paper, right? I would suggest, using a laptop or a desktop for those tasks. Other than that though, for your smartphone, you could make a call, you could receive a call, you could send an email, you could send a file, you could record music, you could sign a check, you could cash a check. You could do a lot of things on these smartphones now. Think about some of the things that you do the most on your smartphone, right? Are you shopping online? Maybe you're ordering food, maybe you're ordering a ride. The possibilities are almost endless with a smart device.
Good afternoon. It's now 1:30. We're going to go ahead and end the meeting for today. Allison has put the link to this video in the chat box. Please feel free to finish the rest of the video on your own time. And we thank you all for joining us today. Have a great weekend.